Here we are on a cool Saturday morning, the last Saturday of summer before the fall begins. And my Dharma talk today, again, my name is Joy Burns. The topic is, if the topic is right speech, what's so important about listening? So all the other talks, I couldn't wait to get to right speech. And then last week, listening to Tracy's talk, it was like, oh, yeah, speech is also about listening. And so as it happens, I was able to find a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote about listening. I'm a strong believer in listening and learning from others. The Pali word for right is sama, and I wanted to look up right because right is one of those words that kind of can sometimes grate on my nerves, like when I realize that I have a need to be right, or when I'm in some discussion with somebody and their need to be right is coming across crystal clear, and there's something unsettling about that, about the being right as a motivation. And so in Pali, some other ways to, or other words or phrases to think of instead of right is perfected, completed, or consummated. So right as a process, right as a path, not as arriving at a destination. And so I'm going to read a poem that was written by a middle school boy. It's included in Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel. This is a poem by a boy who was bullied. And this is a poem about his experience of being bullied. You're ugly. I know. I've been told this. You're silly. I know. I have realized this. You look like an alien. I know this has been pointed out to me. You have big eyes. I know. I have looked in the mirror. You can't be a pilot. You're not smart enough. It is possible. I have considered this. With every insult you invent, it's strange, but it's true. You point out my many failings and help me to improve. As you highlight my many weaknesses, you also highlight my strengths. My openness leads to my kind personality. My silliness brings laughter to the world. My resemblance to movie aliens only highlights my intelligence. My big eyes portray my feelings and widen my view. I may not make it as a pilot, but I could be. You see, every insult you invent gives me a view into your mind. And although I have many problems, I feel sorry for you. Why, oh, why do I feel sorry for you? Because your mind cannot break free. The wall of insults you build limits your mind and feelings. So soon, if you don't stop, you'll turn inhuman and have the biggest problem of all, loneliness. Think about it. And so the thing about right speech and right listening is that it happens in relationship. if I'm just speaking to myself, you know, it's like the tree in the forest. If it falls and nobody hears it, well, did it really happen? So right speech is about being in relationship. And the Buddhist teachings, again, say only what is true. Speak in ways that promote harmony among people. Use a tone of voice that is pleasing, kind, and gentle. Speak mindfully that our speech is useful and purposeful. And that's from that article from Tricycle that Tracy had quoted from by our friend Beth Roth. This is a poem by Marilyn Nelson, and it's entitled Generous Listening. A conversation can be a contest or a game of catch with invisible balloons. They bounce between us, growing and shrinking, sometimes floating like cloud medicine balls, and sometimes bowling at us like round anvils. You toss a phrase and understanding blooms like an anemone of colored lights. My mind fireworks with unasked questions. Who is this miracle speaking to me? And who is this miracle listening? What amazingness are we creating? Out of gray matter, a star spark of thought leaps between synapses into the air and pours through gray matter into my heart. How can I not listen generously? And so speech, it can certainly come from my head, but it can also come from my heart. And it can also come from my gut. And deep listening occurs between individuals, and it can also occur between me and my own mind. The day of the tornado a couple of weeks back, I have this little voice every now and then, and it says things to me, and it was very clear, and it said, do not park over there, park over there. And I listened, and I parked over there, and if I had parked over there, a big tree would have fallen on my car, because where I work was right where the funnel of the tornado came, and it chopped all the tops off of all the trees on Hartford Turnpike. And so my car was okay. But on another day, the little voice said, do not eat that thing that's in your refrigerator because it's old. And I thought, yeah, but it's one of my favorite foods and I like it, and it doesn't look that old. And my gut said very unkind things to me about the fact that I ate that, and reminded me that I need to listen to the little voice here, here, and most importantly in my guts down here. The reality is that healing happens between people. The wound in me evokes the healer in you, and the wound in you invokes the healer in me. And then as the two healers, we collaborate. And so that's the power of speech and listening, is that collaboration. Is me listening. So listening with my head, but also using my emotional intelligence to listen to you, not just the words that you say, but your body language and what it's saying to me. I went to Mark Brackett's office years ago when I first learned about the stuff that he was teaching kids in the ruler approach. And he has this deck of cards on his desk that has facial expressions. On one side is the facial expression, and on the other side is what the facial expression represents. And so he was finishing a phone conversation, so he handed me them and said, why don't you just look at these and see how many you get right? And I got them all wrong. And that's because when I'm talking to people or when I'm listening to someone, one of my habits of mind is that I'm planning my response, which isn't listening. It's kind of more like practicing waiting to speak. And so when I really listen, I'm listening to what you say, and I'm also listening to what your body language, your facial expressions, your voice inflection, your tone is telling me about the collaboration between you and I in this conversation. And so when I'm talking to a patient and the patient is saying, yes, 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 of course, yes, 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 and their body is saying, no, 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 then I have to do a check-in and say, your mouth is saying yes, and your body is saying, hell no. So which is it? I believe the hell no more than I believe the yes. And that's what helps us to unpack all the layers of conditioning and get to the root of the love, the compassion, the kindness, the empathy that can arise when I'm able to speak from a place of right speech and of right listening. Thich Nhat Hanh says, healing our suffering is an art. If we know how to suffer, we suffer much less, and we're no longer afraid of being overwhelmed by the suffering inside. Instead, we should fear not knowing how to handle our suffering. So that's the opportunity in the conversation, in that collaboration, is to participate in healing each other. And the challenge is to return again and again to the foundation of right speech, saying only what is helpful, saying only what's needed in the moment. From Audre Lorde, when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak.